All right, everybody, welcome back to this is the fifth episode of the Wandering Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Samietti Jr., and we have discussions about everything, whether it's pornography, depression, history. Um, which, speaking of history, today is the 4th of July. So, to all us Americans out there, happy Independence Day. I want to apologize for the lapse in episodes for the past 4 weeks. Uh, Procrastination things happen. You ever know like something you enjoy doing, it's a hobby you enjoy, but you just don't feel like getting up and doing it, even though you enjoy doing it when you do it. Yeah, that's been me for the past 4 weeks. Uh, but that's ending, hopefully, because today we're doing an episode. I have two wonderful friends and amazing speakers with me today. Uh, I say amazing speakers, but that's just to make them feel better. Um, my friend Trevor, who might end up being the co-host. Feel free to introduce yourself, my good sir.
Yeah, I don't love that you introduced me as a good speaker because any English teacher I've had would disagree. Hello, I am Trevor. I am potentially going to be the co-host. Probably. I think I can confidently say at this point. Next week we'll find out. I would expect to have an answer by next week. I am a Christian conservative birder. Those are my three main identifications, I guess. And I live in Missouri currently.
All right. Try not to label yourself too much. If you put yourself in too many boxes, you don't know who you are. All right. And my other
True,
friend,
true.
Sean, the historian. Why don't you introduce yourself, my good sir?
Hello, I'm Sean. I'm an amateur historian in Florida, in Central Florida, and I think it's important to preserve history. So I've studied a lot of history, namely the late 1700s. So today I'm here to discuss the history of 4th of July.
Yeah, we figured we'd have an episode with an actual expert. Granted, you're not certified yet. I don't know if you ever will be. But the amateurs tend to have more knowledge than the experts, at least from what I've noticed. So seeing as today is the 4th of July, do any of you guys have 4th of July traditions?
Yes, my
Barking dogs is a
family
great
has
tradition.
some traditions. We usually watch some my my siblings usually watch 4th of July animated shows, and we do studies on the history of 4th of July, and we do fireworks and have a picnic and just the usual traditions of Independence Day.
What do you mean, do studies on the 4th of July? Do you like literally pull out a textbook and everybody gathers around and studies it on the 4th of July?
Yeah, pretty much that. Or me and my one of my other siblings who's also into history, talk about facts of the day and talk about the history of it, and we all just do a big study on it. We remember the importance of Independence Day.
Well, that's interesting. That's the first time I've heard that tradition. How about you, Trevor?
Nothing particularly special on my end. We always have some people over. It's never consistently the same people. But my dad, I think this year he made some brisket, which is really good. I had some last night. It is fantastic. We have people over to swim. We do some fireworks. We're not like super into fireworks, but explosives are fun. And that's really about it.
I mean, it's not bad. I think fireworks were largely banned in New Jersey. I think they're unbanned at this point, but only some of them. So unless you're like certified to do them, like a township or a park or something, you have like, and then I think there are bigger ones that you just can't use at all. I think it was literally last year before that they were like, I think it was 2019. No, maybe it was 2020. Where they're just like, you know what, you can have some explosives, but not other ones. Largely the bigger ones, I think you can't have. Let's see, what does Google say? Are fireworks legal? That's the first thing that pops up. Fireworks. Here's what legal and rules you need to know. All right. The state has some of the nation's toughest restrictions on fireworks for personal use. I wonder why.
Because you have Governor Murphy. Isn't it Governor Murphy in New Jersey?
Yeah, it's Governor Murphy.
Yeah.
The use of non-aerial and novelty fireworks are now legal, and it's literally a sentence about why to be very cautious and why you need to be careful because it can reach temperatures of 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. It was 2017. Okay. Uh, Personal use of ground-based sparkling devices and novelties such as sparklers and smoke devices, including smoke balls, candles, and cones. Aerial consumer fireworks, including fireworks, skyrockets, bottle rockets, and Roman candles, among others, remain prohibited. Well, the people shooting off fireworks literally right around the corner are breaking the law. Oh, well. So yeah, that's New Jersey laws. Gotta love them.
I was actually just about to mention it's like the middle of the day, and I can hear explosions going off.
Yeah, last night we had explosions until 11:30. I think it kept some of my siblings awake.
I heard firecrackers last night too.
I love we're all just like, I heard it. No, I heard it. And I heard it too. Yeah. Let's all add something useful to the conversation. I heard it 3. Yeah. So the 4th of July is kind of important. I mean, at least to us true patriots. The rough gist of it is we signed a Declaration of Independence declaring our freedom from our overlord, Great Britain. And that's about where my knowledge stops, if I'm being honest. Even though I literally just finished American history.
I actually might have something to add to that. So I think, and this is just from a speech I did for English this year. We had to do a speech on our favorite holiday, and me, being the patriot I am, went with the 4th of July. I think John Adams felt that that Independence Day should be celebrated on July 2nd because that's when the Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Continental Congress, I think. But it ended up staying on the 4th.
Yeah, that is actually true, because the 2nd was when they voted on it and passed it, but they didn't officially adopt it on the 2nd, because on the 3rd, they changed the wording of it and kind of like edited it. So they officially adopted it on the 4th, but an interesting fact that I actually thought of after hearing Joseph, didn't all sign it on the 4th. Only 2 people signed the Declaration of Independence on the 4th. John Hancock, the president of the convention, and Thomas Lynch Jr. from South Carolina, who was the secretary of the Congress. The great majority of the delegates, most of them in fact, signed it on August 2nd.
So we adopted adopted Independence Day July 4th because that's when we officially said, hey, this is our Declaration of Independence? Or like, why didn't we wait until August 2nd to have an Independence Day when it was officially signed and everybody was like, yes, we're on board with this?
Even though it wasn't signed by most of the delegates until the 2nd, the 4th is when it was like, what you said was right. They officially adopted it on the 4th. The 4th is when they said, we are free from England.
Okay.
That's when they officially said it.
Do you know why we wanted to be free from England? Like, I know the rough idea of why. Taxation and tyranny and such, but
basically
more in depth than that.
Basically, it's from the idea of states' rights only on a countrywide level. They felt like they were losing their rights, and they had nobody in Parliament to represent them except for those who were handpicked by the king himself. So it was like country rights. They felt that they were losing their rights as a country. And interesting fact, before the Declaration of Independence was signed, most Americans didn't want to break free from England.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
They just wanted their English rights back. Once they realized that the British weren't going to do that, and King George III was stubborn, that's when they said we were going to break free from England. Like, war was inevitable. It was when they realized this war is not going to end.
Weren't we already fighting by 1776?
Yes, we were, but there weren't many battles before the Declaration of Independence. I mean, there were just Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill, but other than that, there was really nothing. So many
Bunker Hill was huge, though. That's not nothing. That's huge.
That was, without a doubt, the biggest battle before July 4th, 1776. But many thought that it was like, say, a fluke. Many thought that there was just a few battles between the British and the Americans, and it was a small rebellion of a few patriots, and it was going to be put to an end soon. They were going to get their rights back from England. Many Americans thought they could reason with King George III. But then they realized that they couldn't.
Right, they lived in a civilized world, and they expected King George to be civilized, but we all know how a lot of kings from England are. They are not civilized.
Yeah, they thought they could reason with him, but they didn't. But they couldn't.
Right, but going back to Bunker Hill, what I do remember about Bunker Hill is both sides suffered huge casualties.
Yes, British actually suffered more casualties than the Americans did. So much
Right,
so
because they
that
were storming the hill.
yeah, because even William Howe, the British general, said it was a costly victory. Another such would ruin us. They lost. I think I read that 2/3 of their army that day were casualties.
How many British died on Bunker Hill?
I know.
1,054 British soldiers, almost half of those engaged, had been killed or wounded, including many officers. American losses totaled over 400. Yeah, that makes the first true battle of the Revolutionary War was to prove the bloodiest of the entire conflict. Really? I thought
Yes.
Bunker Hill was the bloodiest, but I wasn't sure if that was just like a pre-4th of
Yeah,
July
it
thing.
was because
Wow.
the general on Bunker Hill. And an interesting fact about that battle: it didn't actually happen on Bunker Hill. Most of the battle happened on Breed's Hill. The fort
Right.
was being built by the Americans. The
So why do we
American
call it Bunker Hill? Why do we call it the Battle of Bunker Hill then?
Because that was the main camp of the Americans, and actually some of the battle actually did take place on Bunker Hill because some of the American forces actually were on Bunker Hill to guard that hill, but most of the American forces were on Breed's Hill where the fort was being built.
Right. I know
The
it's
main the main commanders of the battle were on Bunker Hill.
right. What's interesting is I think the only reason why the Americans lost considerably less in numbers. I mean, if you compare the stats, Americans lost roughly the same amount as the British because the Americans had less on their side than the British did. But the British were charging uphill. And it's not like in today's age where you lose 100,000 men, that's not even a dent in your population. You lose 1,000 men or 500 men on a colony, that's a massive dent in your population.
Yeah. Plus the Americans were, should I say, better shooters and sharpshooters than the British were. Plus the
That's
British
not a
had
myth.
red. That's not a myth. They were actually better sharpshooters than the British.
That's interesting because
That's not a myth at all.
the British were trained, right? They should have been better
Yeah, they were
shots. They
trained.
should have been, but what's funny is that their fight style didn't even work in America because their fighting style was let's
No.
line up on a battlefield and charge and watch all our men get mowed down.
Yeah, plus the American commander during Bunker Hill, I think it was General Samuel Prescott or something. He told the Americans, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," meaning don't fire until they're close enough to where you can see their eyes. So that really played a huge factor into the casualties of the British.
Right, William Prescott.
William Prescott,
Yeah,
he was brother. He was actually a brother of Samuel Prescott, who was in the Ride of Paul Revere. That's why I mixed it up.
yeah, and then there was Israel Putnam. I've heard of Israel Putnam before, but I don't remember what
Yes,
role he played.
he was the main commander at Bunker Hill. He was at Bunker Hill, the other hill, but he was the main commander.
Okay, did he die on Bunker Hill or did he escape?
He escaped.
Okay, How, who did die? Because I know some prominent people died on
Joseph
Bunker
Warren.
Hill.
Joseph
Oh
Warren.
yeah, Joseph Warren.
And of the British, Major Pitcairn, who was the British officer at Lexington, he died at Bunker Hill.
Yeah. What's interesting is Joseph Warren was a physician, right?
Yeah.
So he died even though his job was to take care of the sick and the injured.
Yeah.
But he did according to some of the things I'm looking at right now, he did help organize the Patriots and whatnot. Actually, what's the
Yes.
history of the word patriots for Americans? Like, when did we start calling ourselves patriots?
I think we started calling ourselves patriots in the 1760s when the British started with the Stamp Act and all of the intolerable acts. That's when they started calling themselves patriots,
Right.
at least in my opinion. But yeah,
So,
Joseph Warren was one of the main Sons of Liberty. He helped organize them. He was one of their leaders. And when it was rumored the British were going to arrest the Sons of Liberty, he was one of the only ones that stayed behind in Boston.
wow. So let's take this back. Let's go back through history a little bit. What started the road to Independence Day?
Like I said, it mainly started, I think, after the French and Indian War. After the British got Canada and the lands of Eastern America, that's when they started it. That's when it definitely started with French and Indian War because war cost England a lot of money.
Right.
So they needed to get that money back, and in order to get that, they had the brilliant idea to tax the Americans. It started with the Sugar Act in the early 1760s. It moved on to the Stamp Act in 1765. The Stamp Act is basically when all the rebellion started. The Americans. There were riots throughout America. There were protests. All that. So it started with the French and Indian War. Moved on from there and gradually got worse and worse until the Battle of Lexington, basically.
When the French and Indian War finally ended in 1760. Wow. I didn't know that the Declaration of Independence was so close to 1763.
Yeah. That's one of the main history things that I've always looked at. Like, we went from fighting the French into a decade later fighting with the French. So,
yeah, you're right. It was the Sugar Act first.
Yeah.
Okay, listen to this. In 1764, Parliament enacted the Sugar Act in an attempt to raise revenue in the colonies through a tax on molasses. Although this tax had been on the books since the 1730s, smuggling and laxity of enforcement had blunted its sting. Now, however, the tax was enforced. Oh, so it always existed, and then 1765 we got the Stamp Act. Yeah, the Stamp Act was nuts. What was what was included in the Stamp Act? Why was it so bad?
Stamp Act was basically anything in America, like newspapers or pamphlets or anything. They had to have an official stamp from the British government and and anybody who bought them was basically taxed. Anything paper, really.
So you buy paper, get taxed.
Yes, that was basically it. And all paper had to have an official stamp from the British government throughout the colonies. That's why that's why the colonists were so against it.
Wow. Why? And they were, according to the article I was reading, Great Britain was 144 million pounds in debt. That what's the equivalent to that in today's age? I have no clue. 144 million pounds in debt, not debt, in today's age. That's a terrible way to Google it. I have no idea. I don't even know. Wow. I would say that if I had to guess, I would say it's well over $1 billion pounds in tax. And tax?
Yeah.
Yes, tax. Definitely a good thing there. Debt. So why you made it sound like taxes are a bad thing, Sean? Why are taxes a bad thing?
Well, I mean, sometimes they can be a good thing, but like what's bad about these taxes was that the colonists had no representative in the parliament. People who basically represented the colonies in parliament were handpicked by the king in England and had no idea what the colonies were like. So it's like it was basically the cry of the patriots were taxation without representation.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking of that line.
It was basically a tyranny. Basically, they were forcing the taxes on the colonists against their own will.
Right. In all fairness, I think Great Britain treated the American colonies far better than any of their other I don't know too much about their other colonies, so I guess I can't make that statement without truly knowing. But then
before the Stamp Act, most colonies thought of themselves as their own country. Like, I'm a North Carolinian, or I'm a Virginian,
right,
or I'm a Georgian, or something like that. But when it came to the American Revolution, the Stamp Act started it, uniting the colonies. And it got bigger once Boston was shut. All the other colonies united for Boston and sent them food. And then once we got into the Revolution, and a big part in that was Thomas Paine's common sense, they united the colonies into thinking we are Americans.
Right. Now that's something I was thinking about. Like you said, the colonies weren't united because they all thought themselves their own countries.
Yeah, before the Revolution.
It took. I don't even think they were united truly by the time the Declaration was signed, and then
fully. A lot of them were, but not fully.
Right, because not only did you have to get from Maine all the way down to, was it Maine? I think Maine was one of the original 13.
No, Maine.
No, it wasn't.
Maine was not one of the original.
It was
13.
not. How far north did we go? New Hampshire. That's it. Original first 13 colony, so I don't screw this up again.
all the way down to Georgia.
Massachusetts, that's the M I was thinking about. Yeah, you had to go all the way up north, all the way down to Georgia. You had to get the news from holy cow, that's really far north.
And back then, the only way they could travel was by horse and carriage.
Right. No,
So
Maine was part of it. It just had a different name. Yeah, because everything was different. I knew I recognized it. The map of the
everything was
original.
different. Like parts of Maine were like Maine was like a territory but not a state, and parts of it were part of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. The maps were very different back then.
Right. No, I'm looking at a map right now, and the only states that look familiar are Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Massachusetts looks similar. Maine looks similar, but Maine isn't Maine at that point. Like New York and New Hampshire and Vermont are all the same thing. That's crazy. Did you know that New Jersey was once divided into East and West New Jersey instead of South, North, and Central?
I knew that.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Geography buff. Okay. Yeah, the Massachusetts Bay Company and yada yada yada. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing. How long was it after the Declaration was signed that every single colony heard of it?
Or the Declaration?
Yeah, because I know it takes a
I
long
would
time to
say-
travel.
I would say about a month. Like the Declaration wasn't read in New York City until the 8th, when George Washington read it off to his troops in Long
Right.
Island. So I would say it maybe took 3 weeks to a month. Georgia to hear it.
Yeah. Not signed. I don't care about I don't care about signed. I don't care. Apparently it took Jefferson 17 days to write the Declaration.
Yeah, and an interesting fact, many think that he wrote it on his own desk. That's not true. He was staying at a boarding house in Philadelphia for the convention,
Mhm.
and he wrote it on his own portable folding desk that he invented.
I am looking at an animated map of how long it took for all the colonies to hear. It took until July 22nd for Virginia, and all the way to August 2nd for Georgia, South Carolina. So
Yeah, it's about a month.
literally a month for the most southern colonies.
Yeah.
Wow. And then that's just the major cities, I'd guess. Imagine living on a homestead and you don't know that your country has decided, hey, we're going to be free from the great and wonderful, all-powerful, terrible country of Great Britain. And oh wow, communication back then must have been crazy. Actually, Georgia didn't even hear about it until well after August 2nd, because this map stops at August 2nd in South Carolina. So I think it would have taken. Yeah, it doesn't even say Georgia heard about it. Wow. Okay, I need to know when did Georgia hear about the Declaration of Independence? Georgia signed the Declaration of Georgia joined the United States on August 2nd, 1776. The same day that Button, Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton signed the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. I don't even know who Button Gwinnett is.
Button Gwinnett was one of the representatives from Georgia.
Okay. Was an English-born American founding father who, as a representative of Georgia to the Continental Congress, was one of the signatories of the United States Declaration of Independence. Is that it? Is that all he's... Oh, Gwinnett County was named after him. That's his legacy. The county was named after him.
He was one of 3 representatives from Georgia.
Right. Lyman Hall and George Walton. Okay, who are those people? The Declaration was approved on July 4th, but signed by only one man that day, John Hancock. You said 2 men signed it.
I read somewhere that the Secretary of the Congress signed it too. It, like the back of it or something. He was the one who wrote it out. Because he was the one who wrote it out, basically. And that was Thomas Lynch. He didn't like sign the front of it. He signed the back of it because he was the one who wrote it out. The official secretary of the convention.
When did the Secretary of... Google doesn't want to give me any answers. Okay, so after we get hit with both the taxes, 1763, 1764, what happens next?
What happens next is that England retracted the Stamp Act after being persuaded by Benjamin Franklin, who was in England at the time. So for a few years, things like sort of calmed down and everything until they came out with the Intolerable Acts, which was basically mainly the Quartering Act, but also the act that shut down the Port of Boston. This was basically the Tea Act that caused the Boston Tea Party.
What is the Quartering Act?
Can I answer that one?
The citizens. Yeah, go ahead, Trev.
Sorry, I feel like I haven't talked at all, which is totally fine. I just want to say something because I actually know this.
Okay, go
it
ahead.
Forced the British government said that the colonists had to allow the British soldiers into their homes to provide shelter.
Right. Don't we have an amendment in the Constitution against that?
I think the Fourth Amendment is the one that made quartering. Oh no, I think it's the third.
This is why I need to have my Constitution right next to me. But no, I left it in the other room. Third Amendment. Spell it right, please, fingers.
Yeah,
the
it's
Third
the Third Amendment.
Yeah, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. That leaves it open for a law to be passed that we have to house soldiers.
Trevor's right. Like, that was the Quartering Act, basically.
Right.
They forced to do it.
Hang on, don't gloss right past that, my dude. Listen to the last part of this amendment. Nor in the time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Doesn't this give the government the right to say, hey, we're in war and we need somewhere to put our soldiers, so we're going to pass a law that says you have to house our soldiers?
Yep.
I mean, they could, I guess, hypothetically, but I don't think it's happened since, and I don't think it would ever happen, or at least not in any.
It would under Joe Biden. I didn't say that.
Well, I don't know if there are enough people who would be willing to vote for it to pass it in Congress right now. I could be wrong. We've seen a lot of Republican squishes. So,
well, it's true. A lot of the Republicans in Congress right now are absolutely horrid. But speaking of which, taking a quick derail from Independence Day, I gotta ask: do you guys support Joe Biden?
No, never.
You're just like, no. I can see your deadpan face just going, no.
Like,
and you don't have to answer that.
that.
You could get ostracized for this. Someone could find out who you are and be Sean, you may not work anymore.
I'm not afraid of my opinions. I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. I do not support Joe Biden nor what he believes in.
Right.
I mean, careful, Sean. He claims to be a Catholic.
But the Catholic Church is thinking about excommunicating him for his abortion stance.
Yeah, I think he's literally been refused communion a couple times. At least once, probably more. I think at least once.
Yeah, I think that's...
Because of his stance on abortion.
I think that's good for the sake of the Alaskan... Oh, my word. The Alaskan Church. Thanks, Brain. The Catholic Church taking a stance on what their morals are, because you don't see that very often.
Yeah.
But I think... Didn't California just do something where they found that their... No, what state was it? Some state just did an audit of their votes and found that there was 125,000 that were just test votes. Wasn't it California? I need to Google this.
Something happened. I don't know about it.
Yeah.
I think I remember hearing about it briefly, but I can't remember what state it was.
Yeah, I heard about it too.
I probably heard about it on Crowder's show.
California. I saw it somewhere. Maybe it was Crowder's show. California. No, I shouldn't do that. 125,000 test votes. Oh my! It was New York City.
It was New York.
New York City's Board of Elections included 135,000 fake test ballots in the first voting round of the Democratic mayoral primary. That's mayor. I don't care about the mayor. Still, that's ridiculous. 135,000 test ballots. Why do we have test ballots? What are the purpose of test ballots?
Well, were they using was this a test ballot for a physical system or a test ballot for an electronic system?
I'm going to see. All right. New Yorkers woke up Wednesday morning to find that their city's Board of Elections had once again botched a major local election. This time, it was the high-profile Democratic primary for the New York City mayor. Okay, that's not good. The New York City Board of Elections announced Tuesday night on Twitter that they had mistakenly included 135,000 fake test ballots in the very real first round of vote counting for the primary race, which will likely determine the city's next mayor. The error caused observers to question the results of the first two rounds of voting. Okay, I need to see what are these? What are test ballots? Okay, Google, what are test ballots? Testing is accomplished by processing a prepared group of test ballots marked with a known number of votes for each candidate and for and against each measure. The test ballots should also include a blank ballot and ballots marked with votes for more than one candidate. So basically, they failed a bunch of. I guess it sounds like they failed a bunch of ballots and throw them in to see how the machines handle them. I guess. At least that's what it sounds like it's saying. Huh. Okay. Well, that's scary.
It definitely, I think that would also end up calling into question the election, the presidential election, at least that we just went through, right?
Yeah, I'm
Because if it
literally looking
happened
it
in
up
the
right now.
mayoral election, it could have happened in the presidential election.
Right, I'm looking it up to see if we have any, if anyone's been writing about it, because Google, if knowing Google probably banned a fair portion of these things.
Right.
Presidential
Or they just
election.
hit it on like the 1500th page or something.
Right. I'm getting articles from 2020. Fact check. Results of disputed Maricopa County, Arizona vote audit not yet released as of July 2nd. They still haven't released that.
Well,
All right,
when
this
did
is
they
largely
finish it?
unhelping. They haven't.
They haven't even finished it yet. Okay.
The hand count's done, but in my opinion, the audit is just starting. Okay, that's not helpful. Arizona Senate Republicans' extraordinarily partisan and controversial ballot review again extended their lease this week, adding at least 2 more weeks to their already delayed operation. They had planned to pack up and finish the review remotely, said recently as last week, but on Thursday, he said auditors had decided to seek more time to review ballots and machinery in person. Okay. Arizona's election results have been audited multiple times since November 3rd by the state and county, and the systems were found to be accurate and secure. President Joe Biden won the state by around 10,000 votes, but in December, state Senate Republicans took the unusual step of going to court to take custody of the county's ballots and voting machines. They then turned the materials over to third-party contractors with little experience in elections, launching a first-of-its-kind review that Republican leaders said would restore trust in elections and help the lawmakers write new election laws. This so-called audit has been slammed by experts as a bungled, amateurish effort with results that cannot be trusted. I can tell this article was written by a leftist.
Yeah. The wording would hint at that, yeah.
I think it's a good thing that we're using a third party with not too much experience in this, because if they had experience, then that means they would have been used before, and it thus would have been easier, potentially bought. But enough about modern day politics. These things can wait. We hear too much about them anyway. So we have the Stamp Act. We have the name that my brain cannot remember act.
The Quartering Act?
Yes, thank you. My brain said it was an O when it said it starts with a Q. What happens after this, Sean? Why are the American people still not killing people over this?
Because like I said, most Americans at this time, although the Boston Tea Party happened, the Boston Massacre happened in 1770, and all these acts are happening, Boston Harbor is closed and all this, they're still holding out hope that they can reason with King George III. For some reason, they're still holding this out. But at this point, this is in 1774 when Boston Harbor is closed.
So it took 10 years, and they still don't think that, and they still think that they can win the heart of King George.
Yeah, mainly because they have Benjamin Franklin, who convinced Parliament to take away the Stamp Act. So they think they can reason with him. But many things actually happened before the war that would be considered part of the war. Like the most notable among these was what happened at Fort William and Mary in Massachusetts in 1774. The British had a fort there that had a lot of ammunition and munitions, but and the Sons of Liberty heard about this, that the fort was poorly guarded, so they sent a lot of their soldiers out. And even though an officer fired at them, there was no battle, and the Americans took the fort without a fight. 1774. So things were definitely ramping up there, but there was no war yet.
Right. And at this point, a large portion of the American population still was like, yeah, let's not go to war with the greatest superpower in the world.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
country
pretty
that we
much.
love.
Yeah, exactly. Although there were British soldiers that were deserting and joining the Sons of Liberty, and the Sons of Liberty were slowly building an army, hiding
Mhm.
ammunition in places like Concord and Lexington, and training their soldiers on Lexington Green, in Salem, and places like that. They were slowly preparing for war, but there was no war yet. And yes, majority of Americans didn't want a war.
Who are these Sons of Liberty you keep talking about?
The big name ones like Paul Revere, Joseph Warren, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, James Otis. All of these people basically were organizing bands of Minutemen. And the colonist soldiers were called Minutemen in the beginning because they could get ready for battle in a minute. So they're known as Minutemen. And they're basically the militias of that day. Citizens band together and forming an army. They were basically training for a war. They knew it was inevitable. These people knew it was inevitable, but most Americans didn't see that.
Right. So the select few that could see what no one else could see.
They were preparing.
What's
They were
interesting
the ones.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. You can go ahead.
What's interesting is a lot of history books and history shows and TVs and or TV shows and movies and all. They'll make it look like that every single American was a patriot and they all wanted America to be free and we all wanted freedom and independence, minus a few loyalists here and there. And when you actually look back and read history, it seems to be quite the opposite.
Yeah. Even Benjamin Franklin was making efforts to make peace right up to before the Declaration of Independence was signed. So there was so those history shows somehow really get it inaccurate. There were a lot more loyalists than they think in the colonies that day, and a lot more Americans that just wanted their rights back and didn't want to fight England.
Right. Huh. So what do you think of when you hear the line, "The shot heard round the world"?
That line was actually coined by Ralph Waldo Emerson, a poet who wrote the Concord Hymn. And it basically means that it was the shot at Lexington, and to this day nobody knows who fired that shot. There are witnesses to both sides that say either side. Nobody knows who fired that shot. An interesting fact, on Lexington Green, the Americans were actually disbanding when that shot was fired. They're actually leaving and not going to fight the British on Lexington Green. Then the shot was fired and the British started firing at them. So to this day, nobody knows who fired it. But basically, it's called the shot heard around the world because it was a shot that started the American Revolution and basically started the battle for freedom that led to the United States. And as you know, throughout time, the United States has always been seen as one of the prominent countries in the world. So that's why they call it the shot heard around the world.
Well, I don't think that's accurate. I don't think anyone really saw America as a superpower until World War I ended.
Yeah. They're still prominent in the world through the 1800s because, England and other countries were almost involved in the Civil War. So they were still prominent.
Right. No, I mean, we were definitely in the limelight much of our history because we had the Civil War. And then we were still fighting small wars with Great Britain because they hadn't left our country. But and then we had the Civil War. Did we have any wars after the Civil War before World War I? Yes,
we had the Spanish-American War.
Oh yeah,
Spanish-American. From 1898 to 1900.
That war is controversial, from what I've heard.
Yeah, it is controversial. It actually started because a ship exploded. I'm sure you've heard of the story of the USS Maine.
Yeah.
Exploded off the coast of Cuba, and the Americans blamed the Spanish for blowing it up. But it was later found out that it was a mechanical issue that caused the explosion.
There are some that argue that they already knew that, but they chose to blame the Spanish anyway because they wanted to go to war.
Yeah, because they got Cuba and the Philippines from that war, the United States.
Right. The Philippines. Do we still own the Philippines in any way?
No, we
didn't
might
think
have
so.
like forts there and some. We might have like an army base there or something, but we do not own Philippines. They gained their independence. Same with Cuba.
July 4th, 1946 is when the Philippines gained their independence. Okay, the Nationalist Party won 35 seats in the House of Representatives. I don't care. Okay, the Republic of the Philippines formally achieved its independence from the U.S. on July 4th, 1946. Huh. And their Independence Day is celebrated on June 12th because of their General's Declaration 121 years ago. Wow. So the Philippines are free, and Cuba should also be free. Cuban independence. Cuban War of Independence from February 24th, 1895 to December 10th, 1898. Well, that's when around the time we got Cuba.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been in wars since literally the minute we were founded. We fought the Native Americans, we fought the French, we fought the British, we fought ourselves, we fought the Spaniards. Who haven't we fought? We literally fought the entire world.
Mozambique.
Yeah, in the World Wars.
Mozambique? What do you mean Mozambique?
It was just the first obscure African country that came to mind.
We haven't fought anyone who actually lives in Antarctica. Granted, anyone
No
who lives
one
there.
lives in Antarctica.
Yes,
Technically-
there are research centers there.
We
But
have
you see,
actually
I don't think
fought
people
Africa.
live there year round.
That's true. What are you saying, Sean?
Have actually fought Africa, like in the early 1800s, I think during Thomas Jefferson's presidency, we fought the Tripoli pirates. It's a really unknown war, the Tripoli War.
Yeah, it is unknown because I have never heard of it. The Chihuahua War?
Tripoli War. It was basically from the minute America was founded. The minute America was founded, there were these pirates in Africa who held Americans hostage. They had a powerful navy over there, like powerful ports and everything, and they were using that for the Americans to pay them a yearly ransom.
Oh.
So George Washington and John Adams' presidencies, they didn't do anything about it. Thomas Jefferson came in, he creates a navy, sends them over there, and in less than 6 months, they defeat the Tripoli pirates. It was known as the Tripoli War.
Right, here we
Very
go.
unknown. Very unknown.
Definitely unknown. When I Googled it, I got the Chocolate War instead, and that's a fictional novel. And now I'm getting stuff for Chipotle. I need to add Africa to the search. No, I don't care. No, literally, Google doesn't have an answer to what you're talking about, Sean.
It's an actual war. I have books on it. They're in history books.
I know.
Oh,
I'm saying Google doesn't
it's
care.
not called the Tripoli War. It's called the First Barbary War.
Oh, that explains it.
I thought it was the Tripoli War because they were called the Tripoli Pirates.
No, it's called the Tripolitan War. I thought you were saying che, not te. No wonder I was getting that wrong. My bad. Okay, the First Barbary War, also known as the Tripolitan War and the Barbary Coast War, was the first of two Barbary Wars in which the United States and Sweden fought against the four North African states known collectively as the Barbary States. We were with Sweden at that time?
Yeah, we actually fought with Sweden in that war.
That's interesting. So, let's see.
Apparently they were bribing Sweden. Apparently they were bribing Sweden too, so that's why we fought with them. That was when the U.S. Navy was created by Thomas Jefferson.
Right, so let's see. We have a bunch of skirmishes. We fought a few wars. We had Paul Revere's famous ride.
Yes.
Where are we at now? Why are we writing the Declaration of Independence? What has pushed us this far?
Basically, what has pushed us this far is many factors. Like I said, many delegates, including Benjamin Franklin, had tried meeting with the British generals to create peace, and they have tried contacting King George III to try to make peace with him, and they just wanted their rights back. And what really put, I'm going to say this as an expression, what really put the nail in the coffin for believing that was Hessians. Right before the Continental Congress, George III had enlisted the help of 18,000 German troops known as Hessians to fight the Americans. That's what really convinced them that England wasn't messing around, they weren't going to get their rights back, and England wanted to fight.
Right.
Another factor that helped was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, his pamphlet, which came out earlier in 1776. That really convinced most Americans to want their independence.
Right. Well, it's interesting that we had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists at the time.
Yeah, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists were mainly with the Constitutional Convention, but but they existed during the Declaration of Independence. One of the main Federalists was George Washington.
I always thought we were supposed to be on the side of the Anti-Federalists because, from my understanding, the Federalists wanted a much larger central government than the Anti-Federalists. Yeah,
they wanted a strong. They mainly wanted a strong government, and the Anti-Federalists were more of modern-day libertarians.
Right.
Wanted the smallest government possible.
So it's interesting that our founding fathers wanted to be isolationist, meaning they wanted to have nothing to do with the rest of the world. They wanted to have a strong central government for the sake of taxation, for the sake of militia, and the sake of... There's one other thing. Regulation. There we go.
Yeah.
And then we have today, modern-day conservatives and libertarians, where we want nothing to do with government at all.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about what George Washington would think if he was living today?
Oh, I think all the time of what him and all the founding fathers would think. I think they'd be absolutely disgusted. This isn't the government that they wanted. This is far from the government that they envisioned.
You know, there are some who would argue against that, right?
Yes, there are some that would argue against that, but the founding fathers would be absolutely disgusted with a lot of things that are in the government today.
What things?
Namely, the way everybody's arguing with themselves and not getting anything done. Executive orders is something they would be against too, because many would say every president has done an executive order, but actually, nowhere in the Constitution does it say a president can do that.
Yeah, but that doesn't disprove the fact that every president has issued an executive order.
Yeah, I've always thought that every president has done that, but nowhere in the Constitution does it say a president is allowed to do that. So
that doesn't disprove what you just said, though. That just says, hey, you don't legally have the right to do this per the Constitution, but it doesn't say how many presidents haven't done it. How many presidents have issued executive orders? Executive orders, the American presidency. Let's see. George Washington. Literally all of the presidents have done one. Total orders. Let's see. William Henry Harrison did not issue an executive order.
Yeah, because he was only in for a month.
Right. He's the only one. Every single president has done one. George Washington did 8. John Adams did 1. Thomas Jefferson did 4. James Madison did 1. James Monroe did 1. It stays well below 20 until we hit Franklin Pierce. And then we have Ulysses S. Grant, who did 217.
That's
holy cow. Right. Woodrow Wilson did 1,803 executive orders. Wasn't he a president during one of our great wars? Was it World War I? Yeah.
World War I.
I can see why he would have done that many. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 3,721.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
That does not surprise me at all.
All right, let's see. The last 3 presidents during our lifetimes. Barack Obama has done 276 in his 2 terms. Donald J. Trump did 220 in his 1 term. Joseph R. Biden thus far has done 50. Huh. But yeah, it's all right. So why did Roosevelt do 3,721 executive orders? What was happening at that time? What was he trying to fix?
It was basically the Great Depression. His presidency started in 1932, and he was trying to fix the country after the Great Depression. Basically, his whole presidency of 12 years spanned over the Great Depression and World War II.
Right. So Warren G. Harding, I didn't know this guy was a president.
Yeah, he's very unknown.
He was in the office for 2.41 years. How does that make sense?
Died in office under mysterious circumstances. Nobody knows how he died because his wife refused an autopsy.
Oh, so he was poisoned. Okay.
I mean,
that's kind of the obvious
possible.
go-to. Yeah, he died under mysterious circumstances, and then his wife's like, maybe I don't want his body mutilated and cut open so we can find out why he died.
I mean, his wife didn't like him at all, so
that's probably part of the reason.
She poisoned him. That's what happened. Okay, let's see. Any presidents stand out to you guys? When you
stand out to me?
Yeah, when you think of the history of the United States, what presidents stand out the most?
George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, obviously.
Don't say obviously. There are a lot of people today who think Abraham Lincoln was a total idiot.
A lot of the stuff he did I disagree with, but overall he was a good president.
What things did he do that you disagree with?
For one, the war draft.
Oh yeah, the war draft. The war draft for any of the wars, I disagree with.
He did the first one. The first war draft was in the Civil War.
What's interesting about that war draft was you could, if you were rich, you could send somebody in your place.
Yes.
And that ticked off a lot of people. And
there were riots. A lot of riots, namely in New York City.
Yeah, I think that could have turned the tide of the war in the favor of the South if that had gone somewhere. Well, who had it worse? Was it the North or the South that had it worse?
What do you mean had it worse in what? Like
in this draft where the rich could get somebody to go in their place.
North did the draft like that, so I think the North had it worse when it came to military drafts.
Right. Any other presidents?
Ronald Reagan stands out to me.
Ronald Reagan. Why do we like Ronald Reagan?
I think until Donald Trump, I don't know if Donald Trump was more. He was the most conservative.
I think Ronald Reagan was more conservative.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Why?
But it was also a significantly different time period.
Yeah. And he was overall just a really good president. Like even liberals and Democrats liked him. Like one of his best friends in the government was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who was a Democrat and a liberal. So they liked him. That's why Ronald Reagan had the biggest landslide presidency since we've had the Electoral College.
I'm going to switch gears here and drop a bombshell. So thus far, we've come along this timeline all the way back from when taxes first happened, thanks to the French and Indian War. The Sons of Liberty decided, you know what? We don't want to get pushed around. We see a war's coming. Let's arm ourselves and get ready. We had the Boston Tea Party, Paul Revere's Ride, Bunker Hill Battle, signing of the Declaration of Independence on 2 different dates because people take a long time to get together when you don't have cars. And now the United States has declared itself officially free. If we fast forward to today, I was talking with one of my siblings, and they said not everyone is free. When I said, well, it's a wonderful day. It's Independence Day. It's great. Everybody's free. She's like, well, no, not everybody's free. And I'm like, so who's not free? And they said, Native Americans. What are y'all's take on that? I don't know too much about the topic, so we don't have to go too in-depth if you don't know either. But a lot of people seem to believe that Native Americans aren't free today.
Well, I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the topic either. I know that,
I think Native Americans are free, but they also have to jump through more loopholes than normal Americans. Like, they still live on reservations, and they still have to, register with the government more than regular Americans, and get certificates for their tribes and all that.
On June 2nd, 1924, President Calvin Coolidge signed into law the Indian Citizenship Act, which marked the end of a long debate and struggle at a federal level over full birthright citizenship for the American Indians. The act read that all non-citizen Indians born within the territorial limits of the United States be and they are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States, provided that the granting of such citizenship does not in any manner impair or otherwise affect the right of any Indian to tribal or other property. I think that's where the problem is Indians, not Indians. I could call them Indians, but we could get canceled for that. Native Americans, Indians, Redskins, whatever we call them, they have a deep link to their property and their tribal customs. So I think a lot of this might be tied to Native Americans wanting to be both Native American and American, and I don't think that works. You can't have two drastically different cultures in one culture.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Indian Citizenship Act didn't offer full protection of voting rights to Indians. As late as 1948, two states, Arizona and New Mexico, had laws that barred many American Indians from voting, and American Indians faced some of these barriers as blacks until the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1965, including Jim Crow-like tactics and poll taxes. So they were treated like black people. So where do we stand today in 2021? That's what I'm trying to find out.
I think Native Americans basically have gotten most of their rights back and everything, but like I said, they have more restrictions, more registering for the government, living on reservations, and all that still. I think that for the most part, they are regular citizens and they've gained most of their rights back.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the Native American issue, solely because it doesn't really make the news very much. I know a lot of people want reparations, like giving the tribe land back and whatnot, but that doesn't work because then it means it would roughly mean half of, if not all of, the United States citizens become homeless. Apparently, the Trump administration left us out in the cold when it came to the pandemic. All the federal aid that came as a result of the Stimulus Act and other acts throughout this year were meant to try to help entities deal with the pandemic, but we were left out in the cold, said Tim Davis, the chairman of the Blackfeet Indian Reservation in Montana. There's so much we're going to have to do, and we're hoping we will get that opportunity with the new administration, aka Joe Biden. I think we're gonna need to I'm gonna have to do more research on this because I don't know much about it. I'm of the mind that Native Americans have the same rights as everybody else, barring they don't limit themselves by tribal or customs of their Native American people. But I do know they were set way back with schooling and missionaries being idiots for at least half of the work that they did. I think we do have a few. Yeah, I'm not going to say any more on this topic lest I stick my foot in my mouth. So today is Independence Day, and that is the history. Do we know who signed everyone who signed the Declaration of Independence, Sean?
Yes, I have a list.
Real quick, before you jump into that small tidbit, everyone who signed the Declaration of Independence, it wasn't a willy-nilly like, la, 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 I'm going to sign this paper like we do in today's age. You know, like we get paperwork, we go to the bank, sign this, we go get a car, sign this. You know, we sign our lives away. For the Declaration of Independence, signing that meant it was the end of their lives. If they signed it, they were committing to not suicide, because they weren't saying like, oh, I wouldn't do this to die. They were signing it basically saying, I hereby stand with the United States of America to break free from Great Britain, and in doing so, I recognize that I am an enemy of the country of Great Britain, and thus my life, my family's life, my property, all of it is forfeit if I'm caught. So it wasn't something that was taken lightly. So all of this needs to be put in context. The signing of the Declaration, the wars, the skirmishes, it was done with heavy hearts and a somber attitude, because it wasn't all about freedom, it was about rights. And I think that's something we need to get clear, was they wanted to have their rights, which then of course manifests in the form of freedom, but and it also risked their families and their livelihoods. So that said, who did sign the Declaration of Independence?
You want me to read off the full list, or?
Yeah, read off the full list. Give them all the honor that they deserve.
Okay, I'm going to go state by state, going from state by state on this. Starting with Georgia. Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton. North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, and John Penn. South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., Arthur Middleton. Massachusetts was John Hancock only. Maryland was Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll. Virginia was George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton. Pennsylvania was Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross. Delaware was Caesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean. New York was William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris. New Jersey was Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark. New Hampshire was Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple. More from Massachusetts, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, and Elbridge Gerry. Rhode Island was Stephen Hopkins, William Ellery. Connecticut was Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Walcott. And the last one from New Hampshire was Matthew Thornton. And it's an interesting fact that 6 of those men also signed the Constitution.
Oh yeah, the Constitution is a thing in and of itself. So all of these men, I say we honor them. They literally sacrificed a lot to allow us to be free today, and it's not the same sacrifice or the gravitas of a sacrifice as soldiers going to fight. But it's not something to disrespect them for. As an American citizen, I can honestly say the United States has done some really messed up stuff. But as a whole, I think we're a great country. And it's not a day, the Independence Day of July 4th is not a day that should ever be forgotten or should ever be dismissed in any way, shape, or form. Sean, do you know how old our country is today?
245 years old.
That is an amazing number. Now, here's hoping God blesses our country and we continue to grow and be become a much older country. Any final words, gentlemen?
I was just stemming off what you said. Like, it was totally a great sacrifice that these men did. Like, I'm reading stories right now in this book I have, and a few of them actually did not survive the war at all, thrown in prison, literally. And if some of the prominent ones like Roger Sherman, Benjamin Franklin, and Samuel Adams had been caught, they would have been hung. Literally. Benjamin Franklin himself looked at the delegates and said, "We must all hang together, or we will all hang separately. And we have to band together, or we're all going to be caught by the British and hung." Really, they were traitors. They were seen as traitors and committing treason by signing the Declaration of Independence. So right. It was not a light sacrifice at all.
No, not in the slightest. And we tend to forget that when we live in modern day, easy to live in America.
Yeah.
Any final words on your part, Trevor?
On the words, never forget. A lot of people say the same thing about modern people who sort of die as martyrs for the social justice warrior left. And I think a lot of people just generally forget, and I think a lot of them forget that they wouldn't be able to say that. They wouldn't have the freedom to say that without any repercussions were it not for the sacrifices of all of those people that you mentioned before and more. And I feel like we need to respect that. We need to remember that. We need to honor that before anyone else. Because without those people, well, not before anyone else. Because without those people, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in this country. None of us would be, sitting here having these conversations. And I think we should all be very reverent and respectful of that, especially today.
I couldn't agree more. So on that note, take a moment, everyone, to remember the holiday that is July 4th, the people who died sacrificing their lives for our freedom, and enjoy your family. Enjoy those illegal barbecues. Have some great conversations, whether political, theological, or just straight up conversations. Keep thinking, keep learning, read some American history, and until next time, this has been Wandering Thoughts.